Click the links for Odysee, Gab, BitChute, or to support the channel, or for the Discord, but avoid it. It is total cancer. Okay, so the humiliation ritual of Tolkien. These people, what do you mean, these people? They hate Christians. They hate any order or any in-group preference that isn't their own. They don't build, they tear down. They're not the primary, they are the parasite. They love to subvert, to desecrate. They're sort of human corruption. Even the spirit cooking thing was a bastardization of the Catholic Mass. Writing on the walls with pig's blood, everything they do is filth. They're sort of spiritual vermin. And I don't think these idiots actually believe in an anthropomorphic Lucifer or anything like that. I think they're a group of people with a lot of mental illness. Mostly they worship themselves and cocaine. But they can't stand that other people aren't as degenerate. It's kind of like when somebody gets in shape in the family. It's like everyone has to get in shape because then you just feel like a fat sack of garbage. It's like, oh, look, they're eating vegetables and not eating cookies. And if you're like a fatty eating cookies, you look at that and you're like, it just sucks the wind right out of your sails. So eventually you put the cookies down because it's just too pathetic. So they want people to kind of wallow in the filth that they're in. So yes, they're going to destroy Tolkien, sort of. The four main books are still out there and they're not going anywhere. And yes, I know there are more books, but those four books are rock solid. And I was never a fan of fantasy, but Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit it's like fantasy without it. It just wasn't as fruity as a lot of other fantasy. And the thing with a lot of other fantasy, it's so overwritten. Like any fantasy written past 20 years, you pick up a book, it's like 500 pages. You could cut that book in half with a good editor and like have a tight story. But no, they have to describe a hillside and every freaking detail in it. Or like dialogue. Dialogue is key. Descriptions a little bit less so. Okay, so there was a lot going on, but the stories were kind of about good versus evil, and they were very nationalist and tribal. They were as anti-globalist as you can get, especially if you read the end of Return of the King. And I hope when they're talking about nudity, I think they're talking about like elves and fairies in the, woodland fairies, I don't know, bathing or something, or scampering around, just being silly. Like, what was that? Not the French guy, but the American guy who wrote the story about going to the future, The Time Machine, H.G. Wells. The above ground and the below ground people. It's like a lot of times in mythology or fantasy, the woodland fairies were just kind of silly. And then some of them were really, really dark. But you're talking about, like chicks with wings. Those Halloween costumes? It's like just a chick's excuse to just kind of dress like a whore for one day a year. Where was I going with this? I got distracted by those. My point being, I hope it's that kind of nudity. Just stupid, topless type of things. I don't want to see Hobbit dick in anything. I don't want to see penis in anything. I don't think most people do, especially not like hobbits running around, just flopping around like, who's that guy who did that HBO series? Anyway, I wish I never saw I read a couple of books. They're all right. The great big fat guy who's got a thing for like floppy dongs flopping around. Just South Park did a thing on him, and I can't remember the name. It was about dragons, but the dragons like take forever to show up. Anyway, so I'm sure that the new show will be absolute woke cancer, because there's a probability of everything made after the 2020 riots is going to be just Bolshevik fantasy. No part of me is excited about the new Lord of the Rings. The Hobbit films were a few years after the original, and they were full of woke nonsense. And really, they should have just got new actors. Nobody wants to see a fat elf or interspecies erotica. Gross. So I don't think much post-2020 is going to be watchable, because if something isn't diverse, globalist degeneracy, then the PC babies on Twitter will cry about it. They never actually go watch movies like Charlie's Angels, Ocean's 8, Ghostbusters, all those there was like a dozen stupid movies that came up. The Terminator, the last Marvel, the X-Men Marvel movie, they never actually like put their money down. And even if it's free, they're not going to watch it because those movies are stupid. But they want you to watch it for some reason. They also get really mad when customers, not fans, customers complain, and they get a response because they hate the idea of normies attempting any control of the narrative. The left knows they mostly control the media and they very much want a one-way monologue of propaganda. If normies reject the brainwashing, they call them toxic. How is a customer toxic? They sell films, you buy them. It's a contract. But these SJW Twitter PC babies don't want the customer to have any say on the narrative. And I would love to see people try to bypass Hollywood and make smaller films like sub $1 million movie club or something. It's more possible now than it was 20 years ago, especially with technology and crowdfunding, that kind of things. And there's just the technology in the film work is cheaper, and the technology in producing and distributing the films and payment processing is a lot easier. You can do a lot online. And it's possible because Hollywood movies are so freaking bad now. They've taken off their mask. They want an actual Bolshevik revolution as long as they're in charge. I think you're going to get non-stop blonde man bad films for the next few years because woke is a one-way street. It would be very difficult to make Lord of the Rings today as it was filmed 20 years ago, I mean, in that same style. And that trilogy was very well done. For me, it's on par with the books, like The Shining and some of the William Gibson film adaptations. But I know purists are quick to jump in. The books had a lot of difficult to pronounce words, but the movie solved all that. Plus, it cut out the poems and songs, which were just ridiculous. And if you wanted to make a movie from any earlier, like the 90s or the 80s, the way those movies were made, there's like, I don't know, not like on the level of Ski School, those type of movies, or, you know, but even movies like the classics, I say the greatest film period for those kind of films, fun films, would like, say, if you had to say 10 years, it'd be 77 to 87. Most of those movies just couldn't get made today because they're not diverse enough. Anyway, putting nudity in Lord of the Rings is just absolutely ridiculous. And we're not shocked by it or offended. It's 2020. It's not 1920. But we also know why globalists do these sort of very, very silly things. To subvert a story by a Christian. These aren't the days pre-social media, and more importantly, alternative social media. People talk about what is going on with films as propaganda, and there isn't any solution that's within the system because Hollywood is controlled by actual Bolsheviks. You would have to create an alternative Hollywood. And you need an alternative streaming platform. And if someone can make a buck off it, they'll probably try to do it. But the Google and Apple App Store control 90% of the app download traffic. So if the PC babies whine, they could get them to shut it down. The other thing is the media is as far left as Hollywood. If something isn't globalist, they will look for any reason to destroy it. Look at how mainstream social media or wiki describes Gab, Parler, BitChute, Odysee. They're literally wearing Hugo Boss. Anything they can't control is a fascist to them. Actually, now there are a lot of channels and platforms for alt media and free speech to flourish. You can kill the revolutionary, but you can't stop the revolution. Our signals will get out there. It's not hate speech, if I love saying it. It's not hate speech. It's just speech whose ideas you can't offer a rebuttal to. If your ideas are good, you want people to hear them. You don't want to deplatform your opponent. Every time Antifa or BLM types, what do you mean? Give a speech, they prove they have bad ideas and their speakers are really bad at public speaking. Literally everything they advocate for has failed like dozens of times before and all over the world throughout history. They're clearly brainwashed kids who think CNN is an unbiased source of news, and I think Fox is like far right or alt right or whatever. Like Fox Media, seriously, bro. These people have no idea. So make Lord of the Rings nude. Knock yourself out. I hope it doesn't involve a bunch of floppy dongs. If you're gonna have to have nudity, better have some chicks look like her. I was thinking of the champagne cup reference to breast size. That's how they used to. Champagne glasses are flutes now, tall and narrow, but they used to be wide, and it was a small cup. It was like a B cup, and it was like they said that they compared that to like the perfect breast size. It was like it would fit in a champagne glass, which is a weird visualization. Anyway, where's I going with that? I don't know. Like, comment, subscribe. Go to Odysee, BitChute. If you want to support the channel, you can by going to Coffee, PayPal, Patreon, or just click a like and whatever, a thumbs up or something. All right, guys. I'll see you next episode.